So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming on this Saturday morning. My name is Julie Rowine. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Concord and Carlisle. And welcome to the forum this morning, Running for Office. This is being conducted jointly by the town clerk and the League of Women Voters of Concord Carlisle. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose candidates or parties. The objective of this morning's forum is to increase participation in town elections by providing education for candidates. And our first speaker is our town clerk, Kari Maitari.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, members of the League, for inviting me back here to speak. As you can imagine, the election process is near and dear to my heart. We like to see lots of voter activity on election day, and we like to see lots of candidates running for office. But before I launch into talking about town governance, I am going to do a little PSA and invite anyone who is watching this or who is present who may be not running for office or currently in an elected position to consider being appointed as an election worker. We need lots of election workers at the polls on election day, both during the day and after the polls close for tallying. So we've got forms available here and also online, and I invite you to consider that. Now, in Concord, elected positions have served important functions in town government since Concord was first incorporated. And looking through early town meeting records, as every town meeting started, there was a slew of people who were elected to perform the different administrative, mostly administrative, some also policy functions, from finances to street layouts. And regardless of the number in attendance at town meeting, policies were set at town meeting as well. Anything that wasn't assigned by town meeting was the responsibility of the various elected members, especially the selectmen. Over time, as the town grew and laws changed, there were more boards and committees needed and more individuals elected to complete these various tasks. And by 1947, the Special Town Plans Committee reported that having 35 officials elected at each annual election, while having the advantage of permitting the town to benefit from the abilities and experience of its many public-spirited residents, risked the incomplete integration of the town's governmental activities. Duplication of effort and equipment was leading to increased costs and depressed service levels. This is a very interesting report from 1947. This committee was charged really with creating a long-range plan looking at the capital needs, but what they discovered was that there were some issues with the town governance that the town needed to look at. So after several years of deliberation and discussion, town meeting voted to pass a town charter. That was then passed by a special act in the General Court in 1952 and approved at the polls in 1955. And I've got some flow charts here that you can see over there that show the difference in the number of people that were elected from 35 to approximately a total of 15 elected officials now. The Housing Authority is not included in the charter, where select board, school committee and moderator are. That was passed through different legislation in 1964. Concord has a strong town manager form of government, and that is one of several types of governance that a town may adopt under the charter or home rule legislation. So under a strong town manager form of government, substantial delegation of authority is given to the town manager by the select board, who appoints the town manager. But the select board remains the chief executive and policy-making body of the town. And as I said, the other elected officers under the charter are the school committee and moderator. Now, under an open town meeting form of government, this is the legislative body of the town. In 2020, town meeting begins on April 27th at 7 p.m. in the Concord Carlisle Gymnasium. Every voter has a voice in an open town meeting form of government. They decide how money is spent, what land to buy, local bylaws, street acceptances, and many other issues as well. The select board sets the agenda of town meeting by way of posting a warrant, which is a warning to all voters to let them know what will be considered at town meeting. Others may petition the select board to include articles on the warrant, and there is more about that online in a league-sponsored and select board also sponsored workshop called Mapping the Road to Town Meeting. The town manager prepares and submits a tentative budget to the select board, who places it on the warrant with its recommendations. The org charts for each department to learn more about those departments is available in that town manager's budget that is submitted. Every article on the town warrant is considered, and the public is given the opportunity to be heard by committees through the public hearing process. The Finance Committee, Select Board, and Planning Board all hold public hearings, which is very unique to Concord. And the moderator runs town meeting and also appoints the Finance Committee. Now in 2014, the Town Governance Study Committee reviewed, again, the manner of governance of the town. And they recommended a statement, a preamble to the charter about Concord's continued commitment to open town meeting, and made several, 37 to be exact, recommendations on improving the governance. No changes to positions elected or the tradition of terms of office were suggested in this report, and they did recommend a periodic review of the charter to be conducted once a generation, with 5 to 10 years being too short and 57 years too long. Copies of the Town Governance Study Committee report are still available. Very interesting read. To learn more about Concord's form of government, attend town meeting, attend committee meetings. You can visit the town's website and learn about current activities of town departments and committees, read town reports, reviewing meeting minutes. These are available online as well. And as I mentioned, the Town Governance Committee final report is also very useful. Now, getting to elections, the offices to appear on the ballot on March 31st, 2020 are the Select Board. That's a 5-member board. There's one 3-year term seat available. School Committee, which operates under Chapter 70, establishing the educational goals and policies for town and regional school district. They appoint and evaluate the superintendent, review and approve budgets for public education. They are a 5-member board. They are also members of the Regional School Committee with the addition of 2 members from Carlisle. There's one 3-year term seat available. Housing Authority, which exists under the legislation of Chapter 121B. They are a 4-member elected, 1 governor-appointed body. They have 5-year terms. There are no open seats in 2020 for that office. Moderator is 1 seat for a 1-year term. Now, the election cycle is important to know about when you're running for office. Getting your name on the ballot is key to getting elected, and there are 3 ways of doing that. The first is the town caucus. January 27th in 2020 at 7 p.m. in the hearing room is the date and place of that. You need 2 people to stand up for you, a nominator and a seconder, to say a few words about you and why you should be elected. The caucus may choose up to 2 candidates per seat. When you sign to accept the nomination, that night that you are nominated, you'll receive a booklet from me with lots of information about campaign finance that is important to know about that I will get into in a little bit. If you missed the caucus deadline, there's also nomination papers that can be filed with the town clerk's office. That deadline is February 11th, 2020 at 5 p.m. It is 49 days prior to Election Day. You need 50 signatures of Concord voters, and it's a good idea to get more because sometimes people think they're registered and they may not be. If nominated in one of these two ways, you have until 33 days prior to the election, or February 27th in 2020, to withdraw your nomination, or your name will appear on the ballot. If you've missed all those deadlines, you can still run a write-in campaign through stickers or whatever other means, and there's information on the Secretary of State's website about how to do that to get people to write your name on the ballot. There's always a write-in line for every seat that's available on the ballot. So soon after you've decided to run, and before you actually start campaigning, you want to consider whether you're going to have a campaign committee or you're going to work on fundraising or whatever it is that you want to do in your campaign on your own. And of course, there's a form for that. There's an entire booklet for municipal positions, and that is included in the packet of information that I would give you. So whether or not you form a committee, the candidate or the treasurer will need to file 3 reports. One has to be filed 8 days prior to the election, and that reflects the spending done up to 10 days before that deadline. The other is 30 days after the election. And then the third, if there is still money in the campaign, is the year-end report. In addition to that, all incumbents have to file year-end reports, whether or not you have brought in any money or spent any money. That just keeps the campaign finance people happy. And any earnings for your campaign or any contributions, if the total is over $1,000, that has to be posted online as well. And there are forms that I will have online and also are in the back of the room that provide those deadlines. There are campaign finance limitations on town resources. There's a campaign finance guide that talks briefly about all of those things as well. It's a brochure that's available. No fundraising can be done on town property. That includes any type of information about the candidate that may include a link to a website that asks for campaign contributions. Those cannot be available in any town buildings. No use of town resources, for instance, email, printers, phones, faxes of the town can be used either. And employees have limitations on how they can help campaigns. For instance, an employee cannot be a treasurer of a candidates committee. And then there are the signs. What a great way to get the word out about who you are. There are limits on what you can do with signs. We have a sign bylaw and we have a policy, APP 48, that talks about what you can and can't do. For instance, a person can put a sign on a right-of-way next to their land, but it cannot be in the way of a pedestrian or a vehicle. There are limits to the size and the number of signs based on the sign bylaw and what it permits. And signs may be installed for a period of not more than 14 days in any calendar year. So those are important limitations. The building department enforces the sign bylaw. That's important to know. And when you've arrived at election day, you will wonder, or you may know, why people are standing so far away from the entrance to the polling place with all those signs. There's a reason for that. It's the electioneering law that requires that there be no electioneering within 150 feet of the entrance to a polling location. That means holding signs, signs on cars, T-shirts, hats, any type of distribution of literature, speaking to voters and trying to encourage them to vote for your candidate. None of that is allowed within 150 feet of the entrance. Observers are allowed inside the polling place. Observers are not talkers. Observers are not plugging their computers into the outlets in the building. Observers need to be able to hear the names of voters and their addresses being announced. They're not allowed to check to see who's voted already or not, but it is an open and public process, and observers absolutely have access from a half hour before the polls open until the tallying is complete. Observers have access. Anyone not running but wishing to be involved in the election process at the end of the night might want to consider working as a tallier, because as I said before, we really need the help at the end of the night. There's a lot of sorting that happens with ballots in looking for write-ins, and so please consider doing that. If you're a candidate and you're going to vote, remember that you are a campaign. You are the campaign. It's all about you. So meeting and greeting and thanking people is not appropriate in the polling place, because in that sense you're also campaigning. And so once the tallies are complete and the preliminary results are taped to the door, and you learn that you have won the election, that's congratulations. But remember, these are the unofficial results. The official results will be available by Friday of the week of the election, and they will include write-ins, any provisional ballots that we find are eligible to be counted, and any hand-counted votes that whose tally would not be on that tape. And there's also the term of office bylaw, even after the final results are printed, that will allow you to pause before actually entering office. And that term of office bylaw says that the elected positions begin at noon the day following the final adjournment of the annual town meeting succeeding the election, and shall extend to noon the day following the final adjournment of town meeting following the election of your successor. So regardless of the fact that the election is at the end of March, the effective date of office is not until the adjournment of the town meeting that begins on April 27th. So it's a good idea to look for either me or Pat Clifford, the assistant town clerk, before town meeting ends, before a session begins or ends, to be sworn in. Being sworn in, taking the oath of office, is very important. And it makes you the municipal employee in addition to appointed board and committee members. As a municipal employee, you're required to, and you will be given a committee handbook, you're required to read the ethics summary and open meeting law, educational material, and take the online ethics training. And that needs to be repeated at annual or biennial intervals. And there's also an effective governance workshop that's held annually that is a very good idea to attend, to give you the information about how to, the various processes of meeting conduct. And with that, I turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Kari, and thank you all for being here this morning on this beautiful fall Saturday. My name is Susan Bates, and I was elected this past year to the Select Board, and my remarks will involve that particular office, and also I was the only Select Board was the only office that had a contested election. There were 3 candidates for 2 slots, so we campaigned. In coming to the decision to decide to run for Select Board, part of the homework I did was to talk to people who had held the office or were currently in the office to get an idea of the breadth of the responsibility and what it was actually like to be in that role. Because all I knew before was watching the meetings or being at the meetings and some conversation, but I really wanted to get a better idea of the commitment. The other reason I decided it was the right time for me, there are a lot of people who have served on Select Board that have run their own business at the same time and are able to do that. I'm not that kind of person. I needed to have a good deal of space to be able to focus on it. And so I didn't do it while I was working and chose this past year to do it because I felt like I had the resources to devote to doing the job as well as I could. One of the other things I did was to get a group of people. I had a campaign manager and a treasurer, but I also had a group of people around me that I trusted, whose counsel I trusted, who had specific skills, like a son who could build a website, and someone who was good at wordsmithing, and people who just had wisdom that I admired, people I'd known for a long time in the town. And that was very helpful to as the process proceeded. There were opportunities to actually collaborate with the other candidates. A citizen said to me early on, "Why are you running? There's 3 people. You're all good candidates, but why are you running as she was saying, as a third? You're just going to have lawn signs and and I said, well, we don't have to have lawn signs. So we talked amongst ourselves and decided we weren't going to do that because it was potential landfill material and we didn't really think it was necessary. So one of the things we had to decide about was fundraising and advertising. And what everyone has told me, and was true for me, it was primarily a self-funded effort. I had a lot of support from a lot of contributors, but the expenses that were significant were if you choose to put an ad in the journal, and if you choose to do a townwide mailing. And we did both of those, and those were probably about half of the cost of the whole campaign. It's helpful to have on the website a link so people can, many more donations were received by website than by a check in the mail. So, okay, so once I was nominated, or went to the caucus took place. Actually, before the caucus took place, my manager, who, for better or worse, happened to be my spouse, actually he did a great job. He worked at least as hard as I did. But there was a lot of planning involved, letters to the editor, coffees, and for me, because of the nature of the Select Board, I tried to attend as many different committee meetings as I could to see how they operated. And my overall take from that, regardless of whether I won the election or not, I have such faith in the type of governance that we have here with committees. Without fail, every single one was focused on their task, dedicated to what was best for the town, and worked really hard. So no slackers out there. So that was very reassuring. But it also gave me the opportunity to put my face in front of people, and people on committees are people who are invested by nature, by virtue of the fact that they're on committees. Also going to, I got permission from the Select Board chair to attend the chair's meeting, which was very informative, and just try to be as many out and about as much. At the train station, at the post office, I went to Helen's one Saturday, I went to Club Car Cafe one Saturday, just trying different things at different times of day, advertising coffees in the journal, although some of the host shows did not want to do that. They wanted to have control over who was coming to their home, and which was fine. So the sort of takeaways are what I was told was to be myself, because quite frankly, as soon as I did this, one of my friends said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I am terrified." I ran for student council, but I never ran for office after that. So going through this process, I had no clue what the outcome was going to be. But my supporters kept saying, "Be yourself." And the other thing that was hard for me to do, and I suspect for others, is to ask for help. I always want to be the one to say, "Yeah, I'll take care of that." But asking people to support me and to come out, it was more difficult. But I've gotten over that. And I'm very humbled and grateful to be in the position that I'm in. And I thank all of the voters who came out last March, and I hope there are even more voters that come out this March to support our local government. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Rainey. I'm currently on the Concord and Concord-Carlisle School Committee. I ran for a seat on the school committee in 2013 in a contested race and did not win. And I ran in 2019 in an uncontested race, and won. I will tell you, my first stop was to go to the clerk when I first started thinking of running in 2012. And that's an incredible resource. I had never understood how the process worked in Concord, so at that time, Anita Tackley explained everything to me, which was a great help. Then I would recommend you watch a video of the caucus, because if you've not been to one, it's quite an interesting process, and you should sort of understand exactly how it works. The next thing I would do is to reach out to the League of Women Voters. They were an incredible resource to me in 2012. Helping further explain how government in Concord works. The members of the league who have been on the school committee, on the select board, were really a great resource to help me understand what it was like to be on the school committee. Another thing I recommend is that you understand how government in Concord works. So it's a long process. It's just not only town meeting. It sort of begins right after town meeting and ends at town meeting. For the school, they have a particular responsibility for the budget, which is state law, versus how we do things in our town as far as our town budget. So you should understand that. I recommend attending meetings. Go to the finance committee meetings, go to the select board meetings, watch the chair's breakfast. I think these are all really valuable because a lot goes on in this town. There's lots of committees, lots of volunteers. So I recommend that. Reach out to current and former members of the committee that you would like to be on, that you want to take a seat on. It's a lot of work, and I think that they will help you understand that. As far as outside of attending town government meetings, I recommend you to attend community group meetings. Again, a great resource just to meet other people. In a contested race, you do need to go have coffee, stand out in front of the supermarkets. And it's again, a contested race, as much as it's a lot of work, a challenge, I think I learned the most about how Concord works, and it was one of the most valuable experiences of my life. What else? I think that's about it. Again, I recommend, you don't know if you are going to run, whether it's a contested or uncontested race. Sometimes you know you're getting into a contested race, and sometimes a candidate comes in with papers after caucus. So you should be prepared for that. But I would not be afraid of it. But thank you very much.
That's it. I'm going to use this one.
Oh,
Yep.
sorry.
Hi, I'm Edward Larner, on the Concord Housing Authority Board, and I'm on my second term. just reelected last spring. I'm retired, so it's commonly believed that retirement is a well-earned reward for a life of working hard. But in my case, retirement has been, the work never stopped, but it's just what I get paid for. So I was, the reward of community service is seldom anything, about the money earned. It's the challenge is really to find out whether anybody really cares what old people do to improve civic endeavors. Carrie spoke about how we get elected, about the caucus, getting on the ballot. The League of Women Voters is engaged in presenting candidates at public forums. The Journal sometimes runs stories to enlighten us about candidates and encourage us to vote. I thought I'd speak about why people run for office and how to avoid the agony of defeat. I thought on my first draft of this, I wrote a lot about my qualifications and about myself. And then when I read it back, I realized even I was bored by it. So just to say, I've been retired for a couple of years, and I saw an opportunity to win without having to campaign against anyone. No one was on the ballot back in 2014 for the board position, the Concord Housing Authority. I rallied and got my friends to write in their ballots, and I won with 82 votes. With the majority overwhelming the other votes, write-in votes by 77 votes. But I figured my mandate to govern was slim or next to none. But I had 5 years to prove I could do the job, and helped with the other people on the board. It worked out, and I was reelected through the normal process described by Carrie with 1,500% increase in votes. So I feel I had a little bit more of a mandate. And it helps to go through the normal process. And I enjoyed speaking in housing issues, various forums. Since I was uncontested, I felt more I was representing the housing board rather than getting reelected to it. So, and I was concentrating on what we're doing about affordable housing in the town rather than blowing my own horn. I want to talk about the basic issues of serving on a board, whether elected or appointed. I was an opportunist who snuck into an elected position with little housing background. I was not expected to contribute much. My career background was mostly in insurance and finance. So by year 2, I was elected board treasurer. Being retired, meant I could generally be available to sign the account payable checks every week. So I would spend probably about an hour each week in the office, and you get a sense of what's going on. Our board chairman sitting over there at the time was Linda, and she was very helpful, to help me find out what was going on and realize what the issues, the local issues were for the tenants. In 2014, which is the year I was first on the board, they passed a housing reform bill on the state, house on Beacon Hill, and it was mostly due to corruption that was going on in other, mostly larger city housing authorities. In fact, the head of the executive director in Chelsea went to jail for fraud, and there were other housing authorities that were having similar problems. But I want to assure you that in Concord we don't have those types of problems. But it was an eye-opener to me to realize that not only did the executive director go to jail, but the board was censored for not really overseeing what was going on. So I started paying attention to the trainings I was going to, and trying to be more effective. We really have just a couple of problems in Concord at the housing. One is smoking. It turns out we were one of the first housing authorities to actually have a policy about where you could smoke and where you couldn't smoke. But it just doesn't seem to be enforceable very well. So you can't really do anything other than maybe fine somebody. You really can't evict somebody for smoking right now. The courts won't, they'll decide on the side of the tenant rather than on the rules and regulations. And the next thing to talk about is the biggest issue, and this is something that really the town should know about, is the waiting list on how to get into subsidized housing in Concord. It's about a 2 to 3 year wait. The town residents have a priority. There are higher priorities, a veteran, which I am, so I support that, and of course emergency situations. But in the state, there are 3 times as many people on the waiting list statewide than there are unit turnover. So typically it would be about a 3 year wait, but some of the bigger agencies it's even longer. And the problem is the state's not building any more affordable housing, which brings us to what happened in the last few years at town meetings with the warrant items that are now funding. Once they get passed by home rule and come back and get passed by town meeting, hopefully this will raise about $3 to $5 million a year to help us build additional or renovate existing homes to put them in the what they call the 40B index of affordable housing. We've always stayed above the 10% mandate to protect the town zoning restrictions. But a lot of that has to do with things that don't actually create housing for needy people in town. It's more like the Junction Village is going to be 83 units of assisted living, and which counts for as part of our 10%. So we really realized that we needed to get past a affordable funding function, so that the town would have the money to pass things. It's been on the town the town's policy to promote affordable housing in town, but where there wasn't much funding. In 2017, the 3 housing groups. I'm seeing my time here, so I will get going here. But anyway, we were able to get together with all the housing groups. One of the problems with the Junction Village was the finance, the development corporation was not having open meetings. So we started having joint meetings of all the 3, and we've continued to do that. So we're building consensus among the different groups, and that's I think how we've been successful. The other thing is about the town character. I think that's important to everybody, and we don't want to become a Tony suburb like Wellesley and Newton. I mean, that seems to be a majority opinion, although there are a lot of people that live here like they're in a Tony thing. But we just worry about what we do this. But I believe Concord has been around for a long time. I have a friend in Scotland. He said, "How come everybody in the world knows about Concord when it's a small little town?" We talk about history and writers and so forth like that. But I think the town character is the reason why people know about Concord. So I would like to end with a little joke, which is, what about retirees? Why do retirees count their pennies? They're the only ones who have the time to do so. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Carmen Reese. I'm currently town moderator. I've lived in town for more than 35 years, and I started my community service working on the Friends of Concord Playgrounds board, which built the first community-built play structure on Emerson Field. Went on to be a regular school volunteer at the Alcott School. Went on from there to serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I held 2 terms as a member of the Select Board, and I've kind of lost track of how long it's 3 or 4 years now that I've been town moderator. And in my defense, because it's 1-year terms and because they start in an odd time vis-a-vis the election, it's a little hard to keep track. I'm just going to try and briefly answer the question from my own perspective of why run for public office. And in my mind, it's opportunity, responsibility, and personal reward. So what's the opportunity? The opportunity is knowledge, getting to know people in your own community, and having the opportunity to impact how your own community is governed. And we heard so much of that just this morning from Cynthia, Susan, and Ed. And what a wonderful opportunity to get to know them a little bit. The responsibility is for good government. We have a rare gem here in our small town of Concord in New England, with an open town meeting form of government that is honest and nonpartisan and diligent and responsive to community viewpoints and well stewarded and cognizant of the environment and the future and human needs. So it doesn't stay that way without all of us picking up a laboring oar. There are a lot of different ways to do that. I didn't start my service to community running for office. That wouldn't have fit into my life well when I was the parent of toddlers. Then what fit into my life was being on the board of a community playground structure meeting. So there are all kinds of different ways for us to serve our communities in different phases of life. And as Ed says, when you're slowing down a little bit, you've got a little more space and time on your docket, as well as a lot of experience to draw on to hold public office. So that's the responsibility. And I'll also add that, well, this is really more on the topic of personal reward. What's the personal reward? Community is so good for us individually and collectively. There's all the scientific research that demonstrates that you live longer and healthier if you have strong ties to your community. Serving elected office is a fantastic way to be part of your community and know people and be connected with people and form those bonds of concern and commitment. And they're just so good for us personally and as a community. It's also, I find on a personal level, given what's going on our national stage, it is so utterly refreshing and life-affirming to be part of a government that is nonpartisan and is able to handle deeply divided points of view on issues that we have to make decisions on without scratching each other's eyes out and with respect and tolerance. That's one of my key jobs as town moderator, is to make sure that we continue to observe those traditions of respect and tolerance and empathy that we have had in our community historically. So those are my reasons why I think it's worth thinking about running for public office. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
So, any questions from the audience? We have a microphone up here.
Which I will turn on.
Yeah. And you don't need to introduce yourself.
I don't need to introduce. I think of the four of you who spoke, only Ed is the one who talked about the significant issues facing your particular position today. So, and if you want to join in, that's fine, but I really would like to hear from Susan, Sylvia, and Carmen. What are the issues for your particular positions for the next person? Thank you.
Go for it. Okay. Well, I think the select board has a number of important issues on their plate. The ongoing litigation with Estabrook Woods is one. Our eye on the fiscal picture is another. We're committed to building a new middle school, which will, but we know that there are municipal capital needs beyond that. So there's addressing those issues in cooperation with the school department and the finance committee in a way that maintains a level of service, but also doesn't unduly, any more than we already do, tax our citizens. Also, there's a lot of turnover in town government, and we have a new town manager. 2 of us, 40% of the select board are new to the select board, but both Terry and I have community experience in town for many years. So that's an acclimation process that I think is going well, and I think the town has a very strong leadership team, but it's acclimating. So that's basically, I think, what's on our plate. I know I'm missing something, but I'll find out Monday.
Thank you, Susan. I would say one of the main issues is for the town and for the schools is financial sustainability. We are challenged because with the schools, we have 75% of the budget, I think, is salaries. So that's a difficult thing to change. The new superintendent, well, she's not really new anymore, but relatively new superintendent has been working hard on zero-based budgeting. We're doing our best, but I think that's a challenge for both the town budget and the school budgets. As Susan said, the middle school is an exciting project, but also I think daunting for the taxpayers. We don't know a number yet, but it's probably going to be rather large, and we still haven't gotten through the debt payments for the high school. We also, our important responsibility, and we call it an issue, is reviewing the superintendent. So that's one of our main responsibilities. Our other is reviewing the policies and perhaps changing them if necessary. And I would say an issue in our schools is student stress. We are now seeing it from, unfortunately, from pre-K to 12. And it's a significant problem, and we're working on reducing perhaps testing, perhaps setting goals for students, or students putting stress on themselves, educating the community, particularly parents. So I would say those are some of the main issues, and again, I probably missed some important ones.
The town moderator is not a policy maker, so I don't have any of those policy issues to talk with you about. That will be a challenge for the next person who holds the moderator position. And by the way, I will be running. But I think that the challenge for the moderator is really two. One is figuring out how to adjust, tweak, maintain the town meeting process to keep our open town meeting relevant and functional and satisfactory to the majority of our citizens as our form of legislature. And given changes in technology, changes in lifestyle, changes in demographics, there's pressure on that, and real limitations on the kind of adjustments that it's possible to make in order to make town meeting more responsive to people's needs. So I will, in fact, in a couple of weeks, be on the select board's agenda to talk about the results of the questionnaires that we did last year, exiting town meeting, and the views of the public on the experiment that we did and on electronic voting, and to have a discussion with the select board about what to do about that, if anything, going forward. And I would say that the management of the meeting time, how we use our time, how we balance full and fair discussion with respectful use of people's time, and if there's a single place where there are complaints from people about the town meeting process, that would be it, where people disagree about whether we got that quite right. So that will be something to work on in the coming year for the next moderator. The other responsibility the moderator has is appointing the finance committee. and it's always hard work to make sure that there is a good balance of viewpoints, genders, parts of town, skill sets, ages, and so forth on the finance committee, among a group of people who will actually be able to put in the time and effort, because the finance committee is heavy lifting. It takes a lot of time and a lot of attention, it's a real part-time job for the people who agree to be on the finance committee. And I think that it's not possible for the moderator to sit passively and wait for people to show up who want to be on the finance committee. There is some recruiting and networking that has to happen in order to keep the committee appropriately staffed. So those are the challenges that face the moderator.
I'm just gonna say one last thing about affordable housing funding. We passed 4 articles that on the warrant last year, and we were kind of taking a victory lap, thinking that was gonna be, not the final word, but we had the right to say that we have the popular support. We're finding that there are, it's a bread and butter issue for the real estate people in town, and they're funded, of course, by large corporations out of either New York or California, and there's a pushback about home rule in the legislature. So Mike Barrett is the senator here, and he's sponsoring the legislation. So giving him support and following him will be very helpful to get through all the different things, all the different steps that go on Beacon Hill. And then of course it comes back here, so it'll be 2 more fights, one on Beacon Hill and then also for town meeting here. So hopefully we have the will to do that, and I appreciate all the support.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody coming this morning and talking about running for office. And I know I've talked to people and they said they've looked at the previous videos as they prepared to run for town office. So I think that you will have a legacy on moving forward. My question has to do with kind of the mechanics, and I recall the town caucus to me was kind of like a really unusual thing, that most people don't think about. And so for my first question is with regards to what did you do to prepare for town caucus, and how did that fit into your campaign? And then the second is specifically for Ed, and that is you're the only person who's run a write-in campaign, and I was just interested in you maybe providing a little bit more detail in terms of how did you organize it, how did you get the word out, how much time did it take?
Sure. So as I said in my remarks, I immediately went and watched the videos of Town Caucus, because I had honestly never attended one. And I was glad I watched them, because somebody can explain it to you. But, the mechanics of really how it goes, people have to go write your name and your address, and not their name and address, and just so preparing the people who are going to nominate you. I also recommended that they watch it as well, so they're more familiar with the process. What it doesn't vary. It doesn't vary from year to year. It's the same. So just watching 2, some people make speeches, some people don't. It's just that that's the best way to prepare, I think. Those are mine.
I would echo all of that. I don't really have much to add, except just to, be in close touch with the people who are going to nominate you, second your nomination, and be familiar with the process. I never felt the candidates don't have to prepare remarks themselves, but it's helpful. It's very helpful to watch prior caucuses.
I think it's important to put some care and thought into who nominates your candidacy at the caucus, and I've always tried to ask people to nominate and second my nomination whose viewpoints will be meaningful to the caucus for different reasons. You know, for the nominator might be a person who's kind of in a different place in the community than the seconder, so that there's two different points of view on why I should be a candidate.
I thought, agreeing with Carmen, it was getting the right people to nominate me. I was lucky enough to have a family friend, Mary Johnson, who'd been the chair before I'd been on the board, as well as head of the Chamber of Commerce in town. So she was a reliably conservative person, and I also had one of the tenants come to nominate me. So I felt that was a balance, and just I'm trying to justify my existence on a board where I didn't have much qualifications. The reason I got on the board was basically because our town clerk, and it was Anita at that time, but she got the word out that nobody had, gone through the caucus or submitted nomination papers. So she put it in the journal. So I walked down to the office and she walked me through the whole process of getting on, and then I printed up little stickers that I can put on the ballots. So I gave it out to my friends, and that was enough to get me on. I don't recommend doing it this way, although for me it meant I didn't have to run against anybody, and that was a major consideration. I didn't want to be in not that you have to, play the trump card or something like that, and be, nasty to your opponents. But it's a different when you're in a competitive race. I was gonna ask, you ran on, was it Susan that ran for the city, when you were in high school, we ran for student council, right? And I wondered if you won.
Yeah, I did.
So it always helps to win, so.
Can I just add, some of you may remember that a few years ago, Steve Ing, when he ran for his first term for the select board, was on a write-in campaign. And that was the result of a candidate who found that he was going to have a severe conflict of interest professionally if he ran for select board. And when he came to understand that, he had to withdraw. And it was by then too late for nomination papers and too late for the caucus was long since finished. And that was actually a competitive, contested write-in campaign with two candidates out there with coffees and so on, so that it was just like any other contested campaign, but it was a write-in campaign. I don't remember either of them having the brilliant idea that Ed just mentioned of printing up stickers, because at Kari, I think that the one thing that's required is you guys spell the candidate's name correctly on the ballot. So, so
Near enough to know.
yes, so you can get that wrong and your vote doesn't count, and it's not just checking the box. You got to spell a person's name right and legibly. So if there are stickers, that's a whole lot better. I also ran for student council in high school and won. So,
Right.
We're all winners here.
When Susan began her presentation, she was talking about the people who helped her get her campaign together. And each of you has sort of said a little bit about that along the way, but I think one of the things that can be daunting for people thinking about running for office is, who do I need to help me and how do I figure that out? So maybe you could each say a little bit about how that worked for you. Thanks.
For me, it started with really talking to people who had served on select board and had campaigned for their seats, to find out what the critical components were. Also from, material from this is really important, this booklet from the town clerk's office, in terms of the regulations. There are several aspects to it, but I found that between information from the town clerk and information from people who've done it, that was the source to help me figure out what kind of team I needed and what particular skills. And so that was how I did it.
So I strongly recommend, if you don't feel you have any technical skills, you need to find somebody that would hopefully volunteer to assist you with that. I had my son, who was a freshman in high school at that time, helping me with my website, so that was very useful. And he was a volunteer. Outside of that, there's a couple, I have to say, one of the hardest things for me was you have to get this EIN number from national, from the federal government, and I made a mistake and I had a typo. And that was a lot of phone calls to correct it, because you cannot have that. The other thing is doing materials. Be sure you have your name on everything, or name it the proper wording, because that's illegal if you just distribute pamphlets without your name on them. So that could be a campaign violation. And I'm sure that's spelled out in the documents, but not everybody's reading those. And I would say that you probably don't want to have a big group of people. You don't need to have a big group of people, because then it becomes you have to manage the group of people. So, you know, you don't need a lot of people. You don't need a lot of money. As Susan said, probably the ad in the journal and doing mailing are the two most expensive things. So you have to take that into account, but they're not terribly expensive. What else would I say? I would say reach out to people who have run contested campaigns and be prepared. Most people will be very willing to sit down with you and go through it. I did it for a couple of people after I ran my campaign, and you know, I think that was really useful. So.
Just 1 second, I'm just going to say, because I had no idea all the things that were supposed to be done, and Carrie had sent this year the booklet about, you know, you have to file a report even if you don't use any money. So I had to catch up with a few reports. I did work as a treasurer for somebody running for state rep, and it required going to a training in Boston, a federal election regulation commission, FERC or whatever it's called, which was an all-day training. You had to go through security to get into the building, all kinds of, you know, it was like there are all these different steps that you have to be aware of, otherwise you're in violation.
Lots more learning opportunities. So I would say that when I first ran for select board, I was in an uncontested race, and Stan Black was running at the same time for the other open seat on the select board, also uncontested. And therefore I went to Stan and suggested that we team up to hold some coffees, because even though we were both uncontested, particularly in my case because I was a new face, it seemed important to get out there and let people know who I was, since I was asking for their vote. Stan and I went to several places around town and held court for coffee, where people who already knew us stopped by the table to say hello, and otherwise no one came. But we tried. I think, and I had campaign literature which I created myself and printed myself. And other than that, I really didn't have an organization. When I decided to run for moderator, I was replacing a person who was stepping down after holding the position for quite some time. And I didn't know whether that would be a contested race or not a contested race, since I announced early. So I did have a group of people in place who would have helped me with a campaign had I needed to really mount a vigorous one in a contested situation. But I'd say that, you know, the exploratory part of that was just talking to a whole bunch of people who I'd come to know around town, to bounce the idea off of them. You know, what do you think about me in the moderator role? Does that make sense to you? And would you support me? So that kind of informal networking among people who, you know, pay attention to how the town is governed and whose opinions you respect is very important to know that you've got the support lined up if you might need it if you're in a contested situation. And in any case, I really do think that candidates have a responsibility to get out there and be available for people to ask questions and offer points of view to, even if they're uncontested.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
We've all done that.
Yeah, but
I have a slightly different question. You've all done such an exquisite job of giving us from Kari on the kind of external issues that which we have to address and the way we prepare ourselves and organize ourselves, etc. And many of you touched on this, but it's been more leitmotif. What I want to know is what happened inside you. I want to hear about the interior ruminations, the interior considerations that drove you or urged you to actually seek office. Because I think that's important, and I would wonder if anybody would be willing to address that. Thank you.
I've been asked a number of times if I would be willing to run over the past several years, and it was a knee-jerk no for a long time. But I consider myself a townie. I mean, I'm very interested in all of the local, things that go on in local government and in the community. And this is going to sound weird, but this was definitely a factor. The year before I ran, we downsized like big time from not from a huge house, but from a below the median in Concord to a condo at Concord Green. And there was something psychological about that in terms of me feeling freed up. I mean, I don't miss any of the things that I don't have anymore, which is about 20% of what I had. And I know that was a factor. I don't think it was the factor. I think it'd been percolating in my head for a while, but that was kind of a tipping point for me when I said, you know what, I have an opportunity here. Because I also felt like I had to be very able to do a deep dive, because this wasn't a casual kind of, like finance, similar to finance committee, which is heavy lifting, and this is even more so. I needed to have that space, both in my, in my life, in my head, to be able to do it. So it was years in the making, I think.
So originally, thank you for that question. It's a great question. Originally, I would say when I ran in 2012, began thinking about running, arguably there were some pretty significant issues in the schools. And I spoke with a lot of parents and a lot of teachers and was frankly kind of shocked. And I felt like this is one of the most important assets, and that's a bad word, but one of the most important things in our community is at the heart of our community are terrific schools. And I thought that something that I felt passionate about, I needed to do something about it. And it was more than just, joining a PTG or, I think it needed something more significantly done. So that's really the reason I ran. In 2019, I feel like the schools are in a much better place, but it's still something that needs attention. I feel strongly that we need to constantly be vigilant about how we spend our money in the schools, and also the student stress issues. So those were two of the things that were important to me.
I have a confession to make. I grew up in Lexington. And as a youngster, we hated Concord. My uncle went to high school. I remember being not bragged, but I was a little kid. I went to the Thanksgiving football game between Concord and Lexington, and all about the rivalry and so forth. But since moving here, I realized the difference is the Minutemen ran away in Lexington, whereas in Concord we stood our ground. So I feel as a transplant. I mean, my dad moved over here, and he was kind of like the 1960s, the new generation that came here. The first thing he did is he put a fence up on the backyard because the Robb horse farm used that as a trail to go down to the river. And he said, "This is my land. I'm not going to, let these horsemen, ride across." And I'm going, that's not the right attitude when you move to a place. So I have to make up for these things. So when I moved back here, when my folks were almost in their 90s, and I felt I would be back in California where my grandkids are and everything. But I kind of love this place. And so underneath, I thought, as I mentioned, the main issue in this town is the character of the town and maintaining that character, whether it's under threat from high prices or high costs of services, all these issues that people worry about. The truth is that the town's been here a long time, and it's going to out-survive us, but we just need to have the right, attitude. So I changed my attitude from hating Concord to really respecting it.
Well, I think on a personal level, I'm a person with a really strong sense of responsibility. I'm the person who, when my kids were small and they were playing soccer and they needed soccer coach, I was like, I'll do it. The person who shows up on race day on Thanksgiving in Martha's Vineyard and they realize they don't have any volunteers to write down the times, and I'll do it. That's part of what drives me to do this. Now, it was a lot easier to agree to be appointed to a board or committee than it was to run for public office because, notwithstanding the fact that I stand on the stage in front of all of you for nights at town meeting, and that is a joke in my family that they never would have expected that out of me, because I'm actually much more of a private person. But I needed a little push, a little nudge, and I was, like Susan, solicited to run for the select board, and my initial reaction, like Susan, was, "Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, that's like, that's an election. You're going to run for it. That's different than accepting an appointment." But thinking about it and learning more about the job and thinking more about how it fit with, like Ed, my love of this community and my own personal sense of responsibility and my own desire to be more connected with my community, I was willing to do it. And the same with running for moderator. An added piece for me in running for moderator is that in our town's 200 and whatever year history, we'd never had a woman occupy that office. And that was a factor in my thinking about whether I would do it. So.
I have a question for Kari, who's sitting there and everybody else is getting to talk. Do you see a role for the town clerk in encouraging people to run for office? And if so, what are the things that you could see the office could do to get more people to run for office?
I think that any kind of civic activity is encouraged by and should be encouraged by the town clerk's office, because that is what makes our government run. As far as specifically for elected office, I think having information available and letting people know, we will be adding election dates into the census newsletter. It's hard to say exactly what we can do. I think we have to try many different things. One thing I think is important when someone decides to run for office is to get the word out that you're running for office, because sometimes that's the only way that people, in spite of all the notices that go out, realize there's an election coming, and that contributes greatly to voter turnout, which is what I like to see. I want to see everyone coming out to vote because we can. So I'm open to any suggestions on how we can encourage people to run for office. I think having information in schools and getting students involved as early as possible in the process helps, and helping people become aware of what the issues are is important as well. I think our website is a very big tool that we can use better for that as well.
Well, thank you, everybody. And
Thank you for
Thank you for
hosting.
hosting.